Supposedly, this is the 9070 XT unreleased GPU from AMD running Monster Hunter Wilds, and it's in Chinese, so I'm having to do some digging to try to figure out the graphic settings so we can, of course, benchmark it against the 7900 XTX. I don't have an exact matching system, unfortunately, so that is something to keep in mind. Also, judging by the boost clocks here set to 3100, it's possible that this is overclocked. Also, if we follow up on this article, the settings that are being reported in the videocards.com article on this, which was actually asking to the original source of the image, to me does not actually seem correct. Anyway, so this is, again, reporting as it's likely a factory overclock to 3100 megahertz. So they're saying factory overclocked rather than specifically, manually overclocked or anything crazy. They're referencing power color GPUs and things like that are around, 2970 for the Reaper model, etc. Because again, none of this is actually official. By the way, on that note, we finally know when we will be getting the official information for these GPUs. AMD has finally said February 28th at 8 a.m. Eastern Time will be the reveal of the 9000 series. Now, that's a bit interesting because a lot of people thought they were trying to wait for the 5070 to launch first, but we actually also, as a side note, have NVIDIA updating their profile page for the 5070 family on their own website, and we now officially do have confirmation that the 5070 is delayed to March 5th. They had originally announced it would be releasing in February, although without a release date. On that note, though, they also are now listing the release date for the 5070 Ti. It is February 20th, as we had been speculating based on a variety of sources. So we now know when we'll be getting the 5070 Ti and the 5070, and we know when we'll be getting information about, but not necessarily the launch date for, the 9070 XT. We'll learn about it in February. So this means that by this point, AMD should be able to provide us with first-party benchmarks stacked up against the 5070 Ti, if they want to, but wouldn't have access to a 5070 yet at that point for comparison's sake. We don't know the price point. That's going to be a big deal for all of this. Anyway, how about we go ahead and get back into digging into this just for fun? Because again, leaked benchmark, you have to take it as there's a possibility it's nonsense anyway. Even if you trust it, getting direct comparison becomes difficult, but what was my process here? The videocards.com article says they reached out to HKEPC and were informed that this is the high profile running at 1080p, which is obvious from the screenshot, and that they have FSR and frame generation enabled. Now, when I look at this, I actually don't think it's the high preset, and I think we might be running into translation issues. Here's why I think that. Basically, first of all, I can confirm frame gen's enabled because that's what this green text is. This says frame generation, and that's where in English it says frame generation. By the way, if any of you speak Chinese natively, you could chime in on the comment section about any of this translation. But if I try to Google translate this using Google Lens, it's telling me this is extremely high, which doesn't correspond to any of the presets directly translated into English. So I dug a little bit deeper. I copied these characters and searched for that along with the words Monster Hunter Wilds. And a bit of a white background here, so flashbang warning, squint your eyes. I found this website. So this seems to be running some Monster Hunter Wilds benchmarks. And again, using the Chinese language, I can now get a feel for what this is, because this is those characters, right? So if I now translate this into English, this is translating as ultra settings. And if you look at, they have a different characters for like very high, etc., all of that. So again, at this point, translating as ultra high. So it's a little bit odd, but it seems like high is using a different character than ultra high, and high would be the next step down. So given that it's these characters, and from what it appears to be, again, matching these characters, as far as I can tell, this seems to line up with the ultra settings in Monster Hunter Wilds, rather than, as reported here, the high profile. So that's my reasoning for all of this. So the other thing is, this says with FSR enabled, but it doesn't say at what level. Now, I was able to solve that problem by just looking at how the Monster Hunter Wilds benchmark handles this. If you select a graphics preset, it reports the graphics preset here when you finish. If you change anything, including the FSR or DLSS upscaling settings, it reports custom. It no longer reports the profile that you had originally based it on. So with that in mind, if you enable the ultra settings, every preset in this game, including the ultra settings, automatically uses upscaling. You have to manually turn it off if you don't want it. So the ultra settings in this game use FSR at the high settings. So this seems to be FSR high with frame generation activated at what I'm translating as the ultra preset at 1080p resolution. With that in mind, I can now go into a benchmark comparison, but we're gonna have to be careful here. I don't have the same CPU that they do. So that's a big caveat here. They have an Ultra 9 285K. My high-end benchmark system has a 9800X3D. I have tons of GPUs. I don't have a lot of CPUs. So that's the closest performance CPU I currently own. Usually in most games, the 9800X3D is faster, meaning I would have less of a CPU bottleneck if there is any here. Would we expect a CPU bottleneck at this level? Well, that's one reason why I've recorded the whole benchmark footage here rather than just the overall score. And I also monitored with PresentMon on the side to try to monitor for GPU utilization and GPU weight. If we were reporting GPU weight, that's indicating that the GPU is waiting for the rest of the system, oftentimes the CPU, but you're somehow otherwise bottlenecked within the system. Now I can say that on my 9800X3D, there were only incredibly brief moments of GPU wait here, and they were generally not very extreme. The most severe moments happened towards the end of the benchmark as it loads into this town area, where we're starting to see little blips of GPU wait and the GPU utilization dropping a little bit as we go through here. Nothing extreme, but especially again as it loads in this town and as we go through it, that's where we're seeing a little bit of CPU limitation. Now, if the 285K performs worse in this game, it's possible you could get a little bit more CPU limited on that system than I am here. However, there are outlier games where the 285K could outperform a 9800X3D if just, the stars align. That's not what's typical, but I haven't tested them side by side in this game, so I actually don't know which one's the case. Anyway, with all of that being said, this is what my completely stock, and it's the made by AMD model 7900 XTX scores in this test. The made by AMD model does not boost super well compared to a lot of the factory overclocked AIC partner cards. And again, it does appear that if this is real, 9070 XT that they were showing here did appear to have a very high boost clock. With that being said, the overall average is like margin of error difference here. They're incredibly close. I'm getting about 210 FPS average. They were getting 212-ish FPS average. So in other words, with all of these massive caveats of we don't even know if this is a real benchmark and it's not being tested on the same system, and again, I'm not, am I misinterpreting these settings? With all of those caveats, it looks like this is about matching the performance of my made by AMD 7900 XTX running at completely stock. But again, completely different system. It's a random leak. Who knows? But this is still a fun investigation to go through. Anyway, I think that's most of the news I've got for you today. I did mention the... Oh, one more thing though. On the 9070 XT, there had been a bunch of rumors about a 32 gigabyte model. I've seen this reported widely. That is being shot down directly by AMD's Frank Azor. He is replying to a tweet of an article about the 32 gigabyte version leak saying, no, the 9070 XT card is not coming in 32 gigabytes. So there you go. If you've seen the 32 gigabyte leak, officially by AMD, denial of that coming in. I think the only other thing I had beyond the official release dates for the 5070 and the 5070 Ti is there is also a leaked benchmark for the 5070 Ti in Blender. They're showing it as about 7.6% faster than a 4070 Ti Super in Blender, putting it on par with a 4080 Super in the OpenCL test. So basically a couple of benchmarks to go off of here. Now, none of that sounds, especially that Blender result, sounds unusual based on what NVIDIA's already told us. It just really kind of seems to corroborate what NVIDIA's already told us. Remember, if you look at their 5070 Ti performance claims, they're claiming when you're not using multi-frame gen versus non-multi-frame gen, when they're at like-for-like settings, about a 20% performance uplift, but that's compared to the 4070 Ti, not the 4070 Ti Super. As I've discussed in other videos, I think I have the chart pulled up here, the 5070 Ti versus the 4070 Ti, if it's 20% faster, if we then compare against the 4070 Ti Super, which is about itself 9% faster than a 4070 Ti, that then makes the 5070 Ti about 10% faster than the 4070 Ti Super. This benchmark showing about 8% faster is right in line with that. So there is this leaked benchmark. It just seems to corroborate NVIDIA's claims we've already seen on this chart. And again, remember that this same chart, when just looking at those values, not the multi-frame gen versus non-multi-frame gen, did turn out fairly accurate for the 5090 and the 5080. Real-world benchmarks from third-party testing were somewhat close to what we saw on these charts. And I just heard a massive crashing sound. I wonder if my cat has destroyed something. That's interesting. Maybe we need to end the video. Wish me luck. I hope all of you have an excellent day.